And we are live. So welcome everyone to our webinar, Social Media and Vaccine Hesitancy, How to Eradicate the Virus of Misinformation. I'm very happy to be here with you today with a lot of great speakers to address this very timely and important issue. So, as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic came at a time when vaccine hesitancy and distrust was already a very real problem in Europe and especially in a number of member states. And in the context of the current pandemic, ensuring equitable access to vaccines for all EU citizens, but also making sure that the vaccine confidence is increased is a part very important of the EU vaccination strategy. So as you know already, at Think Young, we are engaged in this topic since 2017. Back then, we did a research on the youth vaccine perception in Europe. And to directly tackle this problem, we also built the Young Coalition for Prevention and Vaccination. This is a coalition that is made of young healthcare professionals with more than 20 nationalities. And we are taking with them a proactive stance to tackle the issue of vaccine hesitancy, but also to advocate for the important role of vaccination and prevention across Europe, both at the EU and the national level. And we also call for more involvement from young people in this important topic. So, as I was saying, the spread of disinformation on social media contributes to the phenomenon of increasing distrust and vaccine hesitancy, which is particularly damaging. So for this reason, it's very important and essential to discuss how digital platform can also counteract the proliferation of false information and contribute to the awareness of the importance of vaccine and prevention. So we are very honored to have here 5 very special guests joining us today to join this conversation and to share our thoughts on this topic. We have Christina Stump, who is Head of Media Convergence and Social Media Units at the European Commission, DG Connect. We have MEP Cyrus Angerer, member of the European Parliament, who is also a YC4PV ambassador. We have Anya Elset, Public Policy Manager, EU Affairs at Facebook. Céline Berlac-Lee, who is a member of Engage Teams. And last but not least, Dr. William Budd from Team Halo. So to everyone watching, please send your comments and your questions for the speakers. You can directly put your questions in the comments on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, whenever you're watching, and we will make sure to ask them at the end of the talk. Let's start now with some opening question. And my first question will be for you, MEP Angerer. So even before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we knew that vaccine hesitancy was problematic across Europe. For instance, between 2016 and 2017, there were outbreaks of vaccine preventable disease, including measles, for example. So in your opinion, what is the reason for this increased level of hesitancy, and how do you think that COVID-19 also impacted this?
Yes, thank you, Julia. First of all, thank you for organizing this event and for inviting me to it. In recent history, we have really seen the rise of social media and the internet, which has had a huge impact on people's behaviors and beliefs. Social media has empowered people to make their voices and their opinions heard and find other people with the same convictions and beliefs. Many of us end up living in these social media bubbles. And it has been a very positive development. But as we know, not all opinions and beliefs are based on facts and they do not necessarily reflect reality. So the development also has its downside, because sometimes it translates into a situation where disinformation is validated and it finds its way into public perception. While expertise and science, even in the past, used to be challenged, at the end of the day, there was a perception of objectivity which was associated with them. Expertise had the final word on matters, and people found also comfort in this, because the reliability provided peace of mind. However, slowly we are seeing a reality shift in this regard. It's becoming more and more frequent for expert opinion to be publicly challenged or even ridiculed by sectorial beliefs, rumors, conspiracy theories on social media. So most of the time, such beliefs and rumors appeal to human beings' most basic instincts, such as the fear of the unknown and the need to protect oneself against anything that is new or different. And it is therefore quite easy for this sentiment to find support and infiltrate in our societies rather quickly. As far as for the COVID-19 pandemic is concerned, it has really served for this sentiment to strengthen its power and flourish. Also, because there was a number of things which anti-vaxxers could latch on to validate their narrative, such as some side effects, for instance, of specific vaccines, and the fragmented response that we saw from different countries. However, I think that most important message to make in this regard is that the sentiment leading to vaccine hesitancy, especially in times of a pandemic, should not be dismissed or snubbed. It is only normal that people have questions and fears, especially in times of crisis. And I believe that some other reasons, for instance, for vaccine hesitancy, which started well before COVID, is that for generations now we have been free from viruses, as you mentioned, for instance, measles and different diseases that have left so many victims throughout history. So the collective memory seems to have forgotten that this was all thanks to vaccinations and the vaccination of our population. So it is the responsibility of us as decision makers and governments to invest in information campaigns to counter these realities and to alleviate people's fears through communication campaigns and through consistency in the way that they manage vaccine programs and crises. So it is crucial that governments are united in the fight against disinformation. It will be a constant battle which we will have to face in all aspects of policy making. But fortunately, I think the rise of technology and investment in research and innovation is also being used as one of the tools to combat disinformation, and that is something very important.
Thank you very much, MEP Anger, for this first answer. And I would like to move now to you, Christina. So you are in charge of the European Commission policy related to disinformation. How do you see the role of social media in contributing or fueling disinformation on vaccination? And what are some of the developments that you maybe notice also in the current COVID-19 pandemic context?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Basically, what I often stress is that disinformation or conspiracy theories are as such not a new phenomenon. So it has not developed with the development of social media. What has changed overall with the by use of social media platforms is that such information can spread with a virality, with a speed that is unprecedented. And this is, I think, is even more the case when it comes to the COVID crisis. Because as the previous speaker well noted, the COVID crisis, the COVID pandemic created the perfect conditions for the propagation of this infodemic, so to say, because of the fears, because of the lack of the information at the beginning of the pandemic, and so on. So I think it has basically put a spotlight on the problem of disinformation, that this can really cause a major challenge for society. And basically what is very different is that the stakes are much higher. That basically if there is a lot of vaccine related disinformation out there, that this can completely undermine all the efforts that member states, the Commission, the healthcare professionals are doing to get out of the crisis. In terms of trends, what is new, I think that even I would say that the amount of disinformation that is out there and the speed how this was propagated was even higher than regarding other topics, because everybody was speaking about this topic. And what I think is also new is the importance of misinformation, because we often differentiate in my policy area between disinformation, that is basically spread with intent, with a malicious intent, and misinformation that people spread with a good intent because they really believe in this. And I think this has also changed a little bit the direction that we are doing, that this is also an important area. To focus back and to summarize a little bit, just to say what we are doing in the Commission in this regard, that at the beginning of the crisis, we have set up a monitoring framework with major online platforms to see what they are doing in order to fight COVID-related disinformation. Now the focus is obviously on vaccines-related disinformation. And there, but I must also say that social media platforms have done in this past area more than ever before to take steps against the fight of disinformation. And we acknowledge this effort. At the same time, we think that still more needs to be done, and I am happy to get back to that at a later point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And indeed, you were talking about the social media platform, so I would like us to move the conversation and to ask Anya a question about social media platform actions and strategies. So digital platforms such as Facebook or YouTube also have started to put in place some initiative to counter the spread of fake news about COVID-19 and vaccines in general. So could you tell us a bit more about the practical strategy that social media apply or could apply also in the future to stop the spread of misinformation and disinformation?
Yes, absolutely, and hello everyone. So from our perspective as a company, but also a platform where people come to share various points of views, and to Christina's point, often engaging in discussions that can lead to misinformation, and especially around health issues. This has paramount consequences for the real world situations, and especially real world harm. We have taken a number of steps, in fact, to address this. Since the spread of pandemic, this kind of policy that we address COVID-19, specifically misinformation, and then COVID-19 related vaccination misinformation, hesitancy, is of course supplementary in a way to the general policy that we already have for many years around misinformation and disinformation. Which basically was broadly framed around 3 pillars, which is remove, reduce, and inform. But here, focusing specifically on COVID and information that comes through us, is the priority is to get people into authoritative sources of information. Authoritative sources of information don't come from us; they come from health authorities, from international organizations dealing with health, but our role here is to connect as many people as possible to our COVID-19 information center. So results so far quite promising. 250 million, sorry, I need to check the number, globally, and from that 31 million in the EU visited that COVID information center during April 2021. So that's definitely a step in the right direction, because our findings show that sometimes it's by giving people access to information, making possible for people to do their own kind of research is better than just removing the misinformation altogether. That would also risk, of course, some kind of censorship, which we would really like to avoid. This COVID-19 Information Center is available in all EU countries and in all languages, and we have the very close cooperation with the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control. We obviously are also aware that conversations don't only take place on Facebook as a platform, they take place via various messaging services such as WhatsApp, for example, Messenger. These are our, so to say, products. And here we launched specific bots which also provide information that is approved by the health authorities, and basically people can then receive information via those platforms. Other kind of strategies that we thought would be useful to mention here is that our conversations that we had also with publishing industry mean that we understand that, you know, access to information means that there has to be a healthy media ecosystem. So in that space, we put forward $100 million to support journalists in our efforts as well through the European Journalist Center. We continue taking down misinformation around COVID-19 that can lead to real world harm. This didn't change since the beginning of pandemic, and basically continue flagging the warning screens when we see that people are accessing information that our fact checkers assess as, you know, disputable or even false. So that work continues as well. So these are just number of examples that we try to do, considering, you know, the reach and the size that our platform has, and the fact that people want to come and engage in those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anya, for this very detailed overview and numbers. And as I was saying in the introduction, we have today here two also young people who are using social media to spread information and to educate also their peers around vaccination safety. One of them is you, Celine. So my next question will be for you. So your project, Engage Teens, it consists of girls and boys from age 13 to 19 that work to spread awareness about HPV, specifically cervical cancer and the HPV vaccine to other young people. So from your point of view, what impact does misinformation on social media have on young people? And do you think that they are maybe more able than older generation to recognize and defend themselves against fake news, especially when it comes to health?
Thank you, Julia. And good morning, everyone. In my opinion, no other generation has been at such a high risk for misinformation compared to my generation of young people. Because social media is a prominent part of many of our lives, information is spread rapidly and it's very difficult to control. We know this. This age group is constantly affecting each other without knowing it, and whether this is at a city level, a country level, or even a continental level. However, in my experience, young people on social media typically fall mainly under two distinct categories: one that trusts everything that they see online, and the other that doesn't trust anything that they see online. Obviously, there's a middle ground, but the amount of people that fall into that category depend on the education that they receive. Fortunately, the world has recognized that social media is an extremely powerful and persuasive source, and we've been taught to be wary of what we see. You know, check the speaker, check the accounts following, check the bias, etc., etc. However, the extent to which one does this and how much of this a habit it is for someone depends, like I mentioned, on the schooling and the social environments of each young person. However, for some, this approach can be very problematic as they begin to not trust anything they see online. And for health-related news, this has some very serious effects. For example, a general fear of vaccines, distrust in what their doctors say, living in denial when others around them preach about the positive vaccines, and this is clearly not what we want. This ties back to, as mentioned before by a previous speaker, the general human nature to be wary of something that is new, something that is different for them. And then to contrast, the majority of young people do believe almost everything that they see on social media, unfortunately. The good, the bad, they believe it all. And many don't want to put in the work to check to see if their sources are credible, and some don't even check at all. However, I believe that this can be solved relatively easier than the problems of those who believe nothing, because algorithms, as mentioned before, can be used and have been used to check information posted on social media regarding health-related news. And these algorithms haven't been used as widespread until the recent pandemic, but the efforts made to contain the misinformation about COVID-19 needs to be duplicated when correcting misinformation about other vaccines, and as you mentioned, specifically the HPV vaccine. And although I have made it seem like young people are just as vulnerable to fake health-related news as other generations, I do believe that we are one of the more equipped age groups against misinformation, because growing up in a digital age has compelled us not only to take information as we see it at face value, but also attempt to verify it as much as we can. And that's something that our parents and our grandparents before are not in the habit of doing. And because of this, I think we are the most equipped, and we are more at an advantage, and we are more easily molded to fight against this health-related fake news. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celine. And Will, I would like to move to you now because you are a guide for Team Halo. So maybe you can also tell us in a couple of words what the project is about. But basically, you are a group of healthcare professionals and you are very much engaged in explaining health and vaccine issues, especially clearly, easily on social media. TikTok is one of the platforms that you use the most. So in your experience, what are the best strategy to adopt effective and user-friendly also health-related communication through digital platform? And the second question would be, how is it possible also to reassure people about the importance, safety, and efficacy of vaccine, and maybe especially young people?
So Team Hilo, we're 70 guides from across the world, and we produce videos mainly about vaccines and vaccines hesitancies, and we've already had 96 million views across social media. So it is important, as you're saying, about getting that message out there and ensuring that we're getting the correct message out. How to make it user-friendly, that's something we asked ourselves when we first started. And one of the things that we realised is that people do have genuine concerns, and it's important that we address them rather than dismiss them. The general public, if they've got questions, as you know, the fear of the unknown has been mentioned previously, the worst thing you want to do is alienate them by dismissing their concerns. So that's the first thing, importantly, to have a conversation with them so they don't feel they're being talked to, that we're listening to what they have or what they're worried about, and so we're answering them at the same time. In order to do that, you need to be quite relatable. So there is a bit of a divide between the general public and doctors previously, where they felt that doctors and healthcare professionals were talking to them, telling them what to do rather than making joint decisions. So I and many of the other Team Halo guys try to show our personality and use some humour and things like that, so that they get to know us more as people rather than just the information that we're given. Obviously, inside that, we include the information that they need to hear, dismiss concerns that are coming out fresh in the news. So we deal with real-time events in the news. So early on in the pandemic, when we were designing the vaccines, there was concerns about fertility, and that was actually misinformation that was being spread. And it's very understandable, especially for young people that are considering having families in the future. The last thing they want to do is affect their fertility by a vaccine that some may think that isn't required. So that's important that we deal with the real-time news issues, so that we can sort of squash the misinformation before it becomes viral and well-known. And that's another good thing about social media, is a lot of our videos can go viral, so you have a large audience that you reach. Taking people behind the scenes to see how, so for instance, I work on the clinical trials, how the trials work, and other people work by making the vaccines and things like that. So taking people behind the scenes so they can see the process allows them to trust us more. So without having like a shroud or a cloud over it, so they can see what we put into the vaccine, what happens during the trials, and the information we relay. In terms of the second part of your question, it is very important to include information about safety and the importance of the vaccine. It's important not to keep humming that down every time, because they don't want the message to be repeated too often, because they feel that you're telling them rather than the conversation. So while inside the videos that are fun, we include the information that's important, so saying how safe it is, using real data and relaying the science behind it in an understandable way, so that everyone from all educational backgrounds can understand the science. So yeah, that's basically how we do it, and how we make it user-friendly is by using things like TikTok or Instagram and social media, and using some of the tools that you can use on there, like green screens, and reacting to other people's videos, and some celebrities reacted to our videos. So it's a general approach just to get the information out there.
Thank you very much, and congratulations also on all the efforts that you guys are doing at Team Halo to join forces against misinformation. That's very great. I would like maybe to come back to Christina. Before, you were talking earlier about the European Commission monitoring program on COVID-19 disinformation. So as you mentioned, and as we know, platforms such as Facebook, Google, TikTok, and Microsoft were among the signatories of the Code of Practice on Disinformation. As part of this program. and they have taken action also to fight COVID-19 related disinformation. So can you tell us a bit more about the platform measures reported in the framework of this monitoring program, and also what do they consist of in a couple of words, maybe?
Certainly. So indeed, we have this monitoring program in place since the beginning of the pandemic, and platforms have taken different actions to fight COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines-related disinformation. The responses has also evolved over time, and it is a wide range of measures because, unfortunately, there is no magic pill or even a vaccine against disinformation that would eradicate this. And as also mentioned by Anya, the issue is that the freedom of speech is a very important European value. So taking content down or demoting should be an exceptional approach. In this pandemic, this has been used by several platforms against really the most dangerous claims that the vaccine kills people, or really information that is contradicting scientific evidence. And I think this can be a valid response in some cases. However, this has to be also complemented with other measures that rather relate to informing people. And Anya has also mentioned their approaches or actions regarding authoritative sources. Most of the platforms, also Google, Twitter, TikTok, Microsoft, have taken similar approaches with banners, information centers, working together with the health authorities. Team Hello, mentioned by Will, I think it's also a very refreshing and very efficient initiative, I think, that can in particularly appeal to younger people. So indeed, TikTok is regularly reporting about this action, and I'm always very excited to see the results from that. Also, fact-checking is a very important area, and here social media platforms have stepped up also their collaboration with fact-checkers, and then have put the tags or warning signals on content that has been fact-checked and debunked. I think this is also quite an efficient means to fight this type of disinformation. So leaving the content up, but basically showing that this has been checked and proven to be wrong. Also, the platforms have updated their advertising policies because there were quite a lot of disinformation in the form of advertising, miracle cures, other type of products that were exploiting the crisis, and these have been also then banned by the platforms, rightly so. So I think we have seen quite an impressive list of actions, and every month we will continue to publish it. So I invite everybody to have a look. At the same time, also to say that more would need to be done in this regard, and I can get later to that. But for example, what we see is that fact-checking is important, but it may not happen to the same extent in all languages. So in English, that is quite broader done, but for smaller languages, this is not necessarily the case. And also the monetization of this information content continues. So very reputable brands, for example, end up putting their advertising next to COVID vaccines disinformation, which I don't think they want to be doing. So there is also a lot of work to be done to avoid this kind of advertising placements that can benefit the purveyors of disinformation. So I think it is a good bouquet of measures, and I think we have also an important road ahead to still continue and step up these efforts.
Thank you very much. So yes, we saw that social media platform can indeed contribute to the rise of vaccine hesitancy, but they can also be a powerful means of combating it and spreading the right information. So Anya, in your opinion, what strategy can Facebook and other social media adopt to disseminate verified and useful information to users, especially in the field of vaccines and prevention?
Thank you, Julia. And here, so we already talked a bit about COVID Information Center, but that's probably just the beginning, and the rest of the work focuses on amplifying the voices such as of Dr. William or Dr. William Budd or Celine or parliamentarians, everyone, European Commission, everyone who is engaged in the discussion and tries to bring forward arguments that are of scientific value, arguments that basically try to dispel some of the myths that arose around vaccination that obviously cannot be done by company like us. We're not experts in that space, but what we can do is to offer support, financial support, credit support to organizations that are willing to spend their time doing that. And in fact, we were recently analyzing that for the report we are indeed preparing for the European Commission. That, for example, the donations that we offer to various NGOs in that space, $30 million resulted actually in 10 billion clicks and impressions. That's really powerful numbers where people try to engage, try to find information, and it's very important that out there's this authoritative sources of information, but also not coming often directly from authorities. There's a little bit sometimes distrust towards authorities, but genuinely directly from experts, from people that are really working hands-on on those issues, and that's very important. We also try to be, engaging, well, I guess, especially younger community. Perhaps we're not TikTok here, but we're trying to put some frames, we're trying to put some stickers. A lot of people likes to put sticker, I'm going to get vaccinated, or I just got vaccinated. It's just to inform other people in your community that this is actually something very positive, that this is not something that should be criticized or be ashamed of. This is actually a very important statement you're doing for yourself, first and foremost, but also for your community around you. And the same way as we always had stickers, I voted, then we came to that idea as well. I think what's also it's important is obviously analyzing of data, and that has been a lot of work that we did during our work on the code of practice with the European Commission. And right now it's just understanding what's happening, where are those hesitancy points, where is it picking up, where is it lowering, and this we can do thanks to various collaborations we have. For example, quite recently we started working with University Carnegie Mellon about acceptance of vaccination in general, and how does it look across the globe. Obviously, other issue is, how we can support equitable access to vaccination, because I think here in the bubble, it's easy to forget that not everyone actually has that access. And that's in that space we're trying to work with really NGOs and with the international community to try to support financially and with any other way we can those organizations working towards the global uptake of the vaccination, and also working on ways that we can tailor those messages that we normally have towards those communities that are basically perhaps less informed or aware about the importance of taking the vaccine. So I would say it's a combination. It's the strategy is us being ready and at the guidance of health experts first and foremost, working hand in hand with the governments, with the European Commission, and the work that we do under the code and under the COVID-19 reporting, especially. It's also an important information tool to everyone who wants to check, what are actually companies doing, what is YouTube doing, what is Twitter doing, what is Facebook doing in that space. And I think indeed I do invite you to have a look as well. And we'll stop here and happy to take any follow-up questions.
Thank you, Anya. And I can suggest we move also to the last part of this conversation. We'll focus on more vaccine hesitancy and EU policy. So to add a bit of perspective, I would like to ask you, Christina, what is the general policy response of the European Commission related to disinformation? And what are the policies already in place to address this issue?
Indeed, so the European Commission is already working since 2018 with the major online platforms to fight disinformation in the frame of the self-regulatory code of practice on disinformation. So here the platforms mentioned before are part of it, and this has achieved quite important progress. This is the monitoring program that has been mentioned, is tied to this. At the same time, we have evaluated last year how this code is functioning. We have also drawn the lessons from the COVID monitoring program to see how this needs to be strengthened. And that's why last month we have published a guidance on how the code of practice should be further strengthened to give a more strong and more efficient response to online disinformation. So just to give you a couple of examples, what we would expect from the strengthened code of practice. One is that it is very good to have the major online platforms on board. At the same time, we also would welcome participation from other platforms, smaller platforms, because disinformation often spreads also there, also from messaging applications to the extent, of course, this is compatible with their nature, and also from the advertising sector in order to avoid the incentivizing of disinformation. Also, this is not, again, one magic bullet. There are several areas to fight against disinformation through the code. So one area is, for example, to take measures against manipulative behavior. So that we have seen also in the crisis, that certain countries have been behind disinformation, for example, related to Western vaccines. But this happens also, obviously, manipulative behavior in other areas. So here more action is needed also regarding new forms of such behavior. Then I mentioned the monetization. So here cooperation between all players will be necessary to cut the incentives, the financial incentives to spreading disinformation, because that is a very powerful tool, obviously, to diminish this phenomenon. Then we also ask platforms to build further user empowerment tools, because that has been also mentioned, that users may need more tools to navigate safer in the online environment. They can be also involved in, for example, flagging disinformation, or users can be given information about the sources, how reliable these sources are, for example, also to give more transparency to the algorithms. So all these user empowerment tools are also an important focus. Then another area where we would like to have progress is more access to data for researchers to understand more about this phenomenon, to be able also to fight it better. And as also mentioned, a broader involvement of fact checkers in all languages and all member states, so that it can be also stepped up. So we believe that with all these areas strengthened and complemented with a strong monitoring framework to see the progress, we can really have a strong response to this information in the coming months. We will work together with the platforms to facilitate the revision of the code along the guidance. And we will obviously also continue other activities in this area when it comes to media literacy or other supporting measures. We have also the European Digital Media Observatory that is looking into this area. So this is quite a complex challenge, and that's why we are also preparing a complex and strong policy response to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. MEP Anger, so you are a member of the Committee of the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, and also the Special Committee on Beating Cancer at the European Parliament. We are also very honored to have you as an ambassador for the Think Young Young Coalition on Prevention and Vaccination. So I wanted to ask you, from your point of view, what can Europe do to ensure that the current focus on the urgent fights against COVID-19 does not make European citizens also forget about the importance of routine immunization? And do you think that social media can play a role in this regard?
Yes, Julie, obviously more coordination at EU level is key when it comes to this area. We need a common EU strategy that will combat the loss of confidence in vaccinations that we have seen in the past few years. One of the good things is that at EU level, we're moving towards more competencies in health, on the health sector for the European Union, which is a very good thing in my opinion, and where I see that citizens want more Europe, to have more coordination between member states. It is true that we have seen different realities in different European countries on this issue. However, I think that there are a number of factors which are common and which would benefit from increased coordination, definitely. One of these aspects is divergent views about specific vaccines, such as seasonal influenza, between health professionals, for instance. Studies have shown that there is a correlation between vaccine confidence in the health professionals and vaccine confidence among the general public. So it is important to see that this link exists and to work on it. We are also seeing that there is a link between age group and vaccine confidence, for instance, for specific vaccines, with younger age groups being less likely to have positive vaccination views. And this could be linked to the historical reality that I mentioned earlier on in my intervention. As I said, young people have lived in a world, thankfully, which is free from deadly diseases and viruses which have left so many victims behind. Maybe this pandemic that we're experiencing at the moment is the first time for many generations to experience a pandemic that is killing people, or a disease that is leaving so many people impacted by it. So although we might have forgotten that such pandemics could actually happen, or that such illnesses could kill so many people, we have also maybe forgotten that many illnesses have now been something that is not so dangerous thanks to the direct result of vaccination programs. So communication, especially through social media, is key. Soon we will start seeing European populations conclude their vaccination programs for the COVID-19 pandemic and hopefully return to normal life. I think that this will be a very important opportunity which cannot be missed. I think that both at an EU level and on a national level in our member states, we need to focus on communicating the fundamental role of the vaccination process in all of this. People need to be reminded that the only way that restrictions could be lifted and whole sectors of industries could resume their normal activities is because the vaccination program has now made it possible for us to be safe and for us to be able to go back to normality. We need to really get this message across European countries in order for people to regain confidence in vaccination and to strengthen the future of routine immunization on various diseases. And I see that the fact that we are moving towards a European Health Union as a European Union can help us put vaccinations as one of the pillars of such a union between 27 member states, where we could coordinate as well as we did for the very first time on COVID-19, but now start doing the same for a number of other issues that are so important when it comes to the immunization of European citizens and those people who live in our European Union from a number of illnesses. To end, I would also like to mention a very good example, like the launch of various applications which we have seen for fact-checking, which can be used by the public. I think that this is something that is going in the right direction. We need more and more fact-checkers and applications that are easy to use and through which citizens, be they elderly people, adults, or even younger people who could be able to access these applications and fact-check for themselves that whatever is being said by whoever is being said, even people who are in power, who are in politics, who preside over huge nations, we should always fact check, everyone on what they are saying, because this is important to know that what we are reading, what we are hearing is actually based on scientific evidence, and that what we're listening to is something that is real and that we can stand on when it comes to us forming our own opinions.
Thank you very much, MEP Anger, and indeed the importance of the collective efforts with the fact-checking also is a very important point to tackle this issue. So let's continue talking about policy. And Celine, I would like to come back to you and ask you your point of view. What specific policies could be adopted to target vaccine hesitancy and health misinformation among young people?
Thank you. I think it's very important to remember that vaccine hesitancy is a social issue, and therefore there needs to be specific socially targeted policies. For example, I think that the importance of education cannot be understated. Educating the public at a young age is very important to combating vaccine hesitancy. And everything that we've all been talking about comes back to trust. So Europe needs to create policies that teach the population about vaccines at a young age, as I said, and that are open and honest about the side effects, don't try to hide anything, that reassure people that the equipment that is used is safe, so that vaccines can eventually become, again, or hopefully the default, and that's what most people would just assume is the right thing to do without having to do so much extra research. And this means that there should be education about vaccines in schools, but they also need to be including parents. Parents and children should be trained on this information together, and therefore this will cause conversations to be happening inside and outside of the school as a result. And then vaccines will become more socially favorable, because something else that's very important in fighting vaccine misinformation, mistrust, is communication, open, honest communication, as well as transparency. And that's going to be stimulated when you have people from different age groups talking about something as important as vaccines. And a way for students and their parents to get involved is to do it through schools. And so Europe should be spending a lot of energy on education, because fact checkers are all amazing resources to help to combat vaccine hesitancy or mistrust or miscommunication when it happens. But I believe that education is a great way to combat it and prevent it from happening in the first place. Additionally, as mentioned before, there are lots of areas that don't have access to information or even access to vaccines. And therefore, I think that money should be allocated to these types of areas so that they aren't being left behind in any of this type of schooling, because not every country has schooling for everybody. And so education should be a real priority here, because that's the way, like I said, to prevent something from happening in the first place. On social media sites to help prevent misinformation. As mentioned before, fact checkers are extremely crucial to be using. And I think that it'd be also very helpful if there was one central hub or website where many social media platforms could collaborate and post information about claims that have been created by anti-vaxxers or just by people who don't know their information, to be disputed and to have promptly the correct scientific evidence to correct this information. Like a quick little cheat sheet, so that, if they are presented with an argument and they don't know if it's correct or not, they can check this website and they can see, oh, is this correct? Is this not correct? And here's the evidence to back it up. Because social media moves so fast, sometimes you don't have enough time to go really deep into research and check everything that the country is providing based on vaccine hesitancy and all the scientific trials. And to have something that easy to be accessed, I think will be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celine. And indeed, education and health literacy are also important assets and tools that we should use more. So this is actually one of the first pillar also in the manifesto that the Young Coalition for Prevention and Vaccination launched it back in 2020. We are slowly moving towards the end of the talk, but before we move to the questions from the audience, I have a last question for you, Dr. Butts. So how important do you think it is to establish a stable collaboration between institutions, healthcare professionals, and digital platforms in order to provide also trustworthy information to patients, especially? And in what way could such a synergy be put in place?
Yep, so as we've heard, misinformation is just as big an issue as getting the right information out there. So it's very important that healthcare professionals and institutions work with social media platforms such as Facebook, and it's been mentioned previously how they're taking down misinformation, and that's very important because that can spread. And there's been said lots of people believe what they read on social media, and that's where they get the news from. In terms of how we can do that, it's important to do things like what we're doing today, like webinars or conferences where we get like-minded people together from all of the industries, and they talk about the importance of why we're doing it and different ways to do it. So me, myself, I know a lot about how the research works and how vaccines work, but I don't have too much of a clue about how Facebook and Twitter and Instagram work entirely. So, someone like Anya would have much better idea than that. So getting together to discuss that and how they could implement that is important. And I think especially with lockdowns and things like that, healthcare has moved online over the past year, and digital communications through about medical things has really increased over the past year. So it's something we should look at now while it's on its way up, because if it becomes an established thing that we're not tackling misinformation on, then it will become a global problem where, as we've already seen, the reduction in some vaccine uptake has led to preventable diseases returning in certain areas of the world. So yeah, I think it's very important, and we definitely need to look into it.
Thank you very much, Will. And now it's time to move to the questions from the audience. So I see that we are receiving many comments and a lot of great questions. And the first one appearing on the screen now from Claudia. Which categories do you think are the most impacted by vaccination hesitancy, and why? How is it possible to effectively target them with specific interventions? MEP Anguro, would you like to take this one?
Sure. I think that, for instance, one of the best things that Facebook has done and Instagram and a number of other social media is, the alert that comes up each time that you read a Facebook post or an article that is on COVID-19, for instance, or on COVID-19 vaccination. So I think that such measures by the social media that we use are very much important. And I think it shouldn't be only on COVID-19 and vaccinations. We have seen this, for instance, with what was happening during the campaign in the United States, the electoral campaign, etc. So I think it's important to have such alerts coming up to make us realize that on a particular topic, there might be a lot of disinformation, and therefore it is good that while you are free, obviously, to read that particular post or article, but you would be alerted that there are so many articles and posts on this topic that might be wrong, and therefore you might question what you're reading and maybe research more. So I think that one of the most, from my experience at least, one of the most categories, and this is where I do not agree exactly with, I think one of the previous speakers had mentioned earlier on, that young people might be more gullible to believe whatever they read. From my experience, I see that young people tend to question what they would be reading. They tend to question what the posts that are seeing. However, many times I find older generations, maybe people who are older than me, 50-year-olds, etc., who tend to believe whatever they read on social media because they are used to a period, to a time when whatever they read usually used to be scientifically backed up or was being said by experts. So they come from a generation where whatever was broadcasted on the media tended to be more fact-based, let's say. There were more experts speaking, and today anyone can say whatever they want on social media. So those people still tend to believe these things. So I think that it is important to have these alerts that come up, like we have on Facebook and Instagram, for instance. And we need to see that these alerts are done on many other areas that have a huge discrepancy, let's say, between facts and disinformation.
Thank you. I think we have a second question from Mihai. Do we have a website where we can find centralized all the fake news about vaccination and the arguments to combat this misinformation? I don't know if any of you knows about such a website or good practices maybe that were put into place to tackle fake news about vaccination.
So perhaps I can try to address the question, although obviously I don't think such a website per se exists, one place where all the misinformation can be found. But a lot of, at least on Facebook, a lot of interesting information can be found when you actually go into the fact-checking related articles. So what happens is exactly as was said before, that you're free to read whatever you want, and obviously we're not going to prevent, that's not the role of any kind of company, private company, and actually not even of the government. But we always work with fact-checking partners that prepare, and that's a lot of work, quite a lot of research that goes into it. They prepare either a rebuttal, or at least they will link you to a related but confirmed scientific information. So at least if you are inside Facebook platform, then you might look for such a thing and with the hashtag, and you might find quite a lot of materials and how this was handled by fact checkers.
Thank you, Anya. And I think we have time for one last question before we move to the 30-second of your final address, each of you. Question from Aisha on YouTube. What are the offline strategies that can effectively complement the online actions against vaccine hesitancy? I don't know, Will, maybe from your experience also as a healthcare professional, if you have any insights on that one?
Yeah, so obviously online it's easier to reach a larger audience, but some people don't have internet access and things like that. So I think so the role of schools and universities and targeting young people certainly should be mentioned, and things like TV adverts, which in England we have quite a few TV adverts about the vaccine and also about COVID itself and protecting yourselves and others. So I think it's using all types of media, so newspapers and things like that, and billboards is a good way. But I think it's important also to have GPs and community doctors should be able to have an area where people can come in and ask questions about the vaccine before they decide to go get it, and have their concerns addressed, because the last thing you want is someone feeling that they're forced to get a vaccine and not quite comfortable with, or they have questions about it still. So as Cyrus mentioned, young people are quite good at questioning things and getting all the information that they require before they make a decision, but it's allowing them to do that is the important thing. That's a role that myself as a healthcare professional, and certainly anyone who works in policy making and things like that, should definitely address.
Thank you so much, Will. And unfortunately, we don't have time to squeeze more questions, but we will take them into account and continue also the conversation with the speakers and as part of the YC4PV project. Before we close, I would like to give each of you 30 seconds for your final statement on the topic. Let's start with you, Christina.
It's a pleasure. So thank you for this very interesting conversation. I think this has also shown that vaccines-related disinformation and so on cannot be easily solved by one player. So my final words would be really to say that here we need, even more than before, a multi-stakeholder approach, a cooperation between everybody, online platforms, authorities, civil society, users, the healthcare sector, in order to achieve results. We are certainly doing our part from the European Commission side, and we'll continue to do do so. And I believe that with the new code of practice and through the cooperation of all players, we can achieve progress in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. MEP Anger?
Yes, thank you. Thank you once again for organizing this. It's a very good way to inform and have a discussion with people on what they think. My concluding remarks would be an appeal to all those young people watching this conference today to ask questions, to challenge whatever they read, coming from whoever it is coming and on whatever topic it is. I think there's a lot of disinformation today, and the only way to combat that is by questioning things ourselves. So whatever you read, whatever you see, question it and research a bit about it, and then be part of what you want to see in the future. So be part of the change that you want to see, even on this topic.
Thank you. Celine?
Thank you again for this amazing opportunity. My closing remarks are going to be very similar. I want to remind everybody to stay curious about everything posted on social media, but I also want to remind everyone that vaccines are meant to be for the common good. You know, you're helping your community, you're helping your country, you're helping everybody around you by educating yourself on vaccines, by being curious about vaccines, and by taking the initiative to get one and to help protect the health of the people around you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Celine. Anya?
Thank you very much for this very insightful event. I just can echo everything that has been said. There is no one stakeholder solution to this. This is work that has to be done, and as we discussed today, by all of us, and indeed something that we touch a bit less, but Mr. Enger was framing it very well. Media literacy, understanding what you read on internet, taking a kind of critical view both on the content but also on the authorship, whether it's an opinion, blog, article, or research paper is really essential if you want to have a good experience, not just on Facebook, but just broadly speaking in an online environment.
Thank you, Anya. And last but not least, Will?
Yeah, so I want to reflect what's been said previously. Obviously, question everything you see online and make sure they're from verified sources and that the information is correct. And obviously, as I work on the vaccine trials, I also want to mention that they are safe and effective. And by getting them, you'll help us get out of the pandemic much sooner than we would have without vaccines. And as Celine said, it will help you protect your family, your communities. They do reduce you from passing it on and things like that, and they protect yourselves as well. So get the vaccine.
Thank you so much, Will. And thank you everyone, to our great speakers, but also to everyone watching online. It's been a real pleasure to have this conversation with all of you. And I also take this opportunity to say that we are very happy also as the Young Coalition for Prevention and Vaccination to be launching the 2021 edition of the online campaign toolkit that we are doing also with our partners. So this is a toolkit with social media posts, reliable sources, tips on how to campaign online and how to address misinformation. So this is also part of the effort and the collective activities that we are doing. So just check out the website and you will find the toolkits. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. And as Alia and Celine were saying, stay curious. Bye, everyone.